Welcome to the Live Free podcast, where we cover all things neuro-wellness, neuro-empowerment, and anything that helps you live free. We discuss and share modern neuroscience principles so that you can remove restrictions holding you back, create an incredibly fulfilling experience, and live free.
Okay, we're so excited to be here with Dr. Seth Barr, based out of Wisconsin. And just a little background about how it is that we got connected. Turns out we actually share the same phrase in our business name. We're Live Free Neuro-wellness. Dr. Seth Barr is from Live Free Health, which is a chiropractic clinic based in Wisconsin. And when we realized we share the same name, and then we got discussing just wellness and health more, we realized we have a very, very similar approach to wellness. We're just hitting it from two different angles. So we're excited to talk about the overlap, the connections. We're going to be talking about mind-body connection as well, and just what it is that we can do for both the mental, neuro, and emotional, as well as the physical side to help everybody live more free in our regular daily life. So Dr. Seth, thank you for being here. I just wanted to start with a quick question. What initially drew you to chiropractic career? Obviously, it's a great career. We love it. And we know that we can help people heal, but there's a lot of different ways we could do that. So why specifically chiropractic?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Bryson. Good question. And it's funny because my story is kind of interesting. I started out in engineering, grew up on a farm, loved the figuring things out, figuring out how things work, why they work. And so I got into engineering, but quickly kind of realized after about 2 years that being stuck in kind of a cubicle, not all engineers are, but that's how I saw my life going, as this very linear path, no pun intended, but it just kind of wasn't for me. And so at the time, my cousin-in-law, she's a chiropractor, and I had shadowed her a couple times, and she was really pushing me to become a chiropractor. And I saw, probably about 20 years old at that time, young 20-year-old, I was like, wow, this is great. Make your own hours, don't work that hard, earn a lot more money. And so all these kind of flashy things that seem cool, which are cool, they're awesome. They're an awesome perk of the business. But what ended up happening was when I was in a chiropractic college, my very first patient in the student clinic, his name was Ken, and he had pretty severe low back pain sciatica going on, and he'd done the typical medical route, the drugs, wanted to do surgery. And he came to us, as frankly, a lot of people do, as their last hope. And it was really cool to see his life turn around, where he got out of pain. He was functioning again. His relationships were better. I think at the time, because he wasn't working, finances were tight. And so he was on the brink of a divorce. It was that spiral down that you talk about in your program. And we started piece by piece turning things around, and he completely shifted everything. And I think it was about 2 or 3 months, and it was really cool to see. Fast forward a year and a half, I graduate, and in the graduation, I hear my name, and I turn around, and he shows up. And I hadn't talked to Ken in like a year and a half, and he showed up to the graduation. And it was interesting because we got to chatting, and I could see he wanted to say something, he wanted to get something out. And so I asked him, and he had told me that he was considering suicide. It was just a huge eye opener to me of like, wow, like this is life changing. Like we're changing lives here.
Yeah.
We're saving lives. And it was at that point that I realized that this was my purpose, and this is what I was put here to do. And that then gave me the confidence to propel me forward to open my own practice right out of college, 25 years old, and just said, let's go for it, and opened up and learned along the way. And here we are talking to you.
That's awesome. Yeah, we always hear about these life-changing careers, but like we hear so much that we don't realize we're literally changing lives. Like in Ken's case, life or no life was the difference, that's about as life-changing as it gets. That's awesome. And that's so cool you had that experience so early on. I'm sure, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing there's been times in your chiropractic career where you've possibly second-guessed yourself or the path that you're taking. Have you had any moments like that where you've then looked back at that experience with Ken and been able to say like, no, I'm going to keep moving forward because there's probably another Ken around the corner?
Yeah. And I think that's human nature to go through struggles and second guess ourselves. And I don't think we'd be human if we didn't do that. So to answer your question, yes, I think that we all do at times. And yes, to the other part of that question, that is a reminder. And since then, in 15 years in practice, there's been other stories equally as great as Ken's, different flavor, but all those serve as a reminder when through the challenges, and maybe you're dealing with a challenging patient, or a patient doesn't respond land as one would hope or anticipate. Those can be frustrating, but always turning back to the wins, right? You can either focus on the losses or the frustrations, or you can focus on the wins and the people that you do help. And those are important.
Yeah. Well, could you share a little bit about what experiences shaped your live-free approach to health and wellness?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think from a personal standpoint, I guess I'll answer it from that, because how I live my life personally is also how I practice, and vice versa. And so, I do joke with my patients that there's very few things that people walk in with that I either haven't personally experienced or, had someone really, really close to me experience. So I think firsthand knowledge is the best teacher. I think for me personally, how I practice and how I live is just to try to live to the highest potential. And what I mean by that is the human body is going to experience pain. We're gonna have pain. That is inescapable in this life. But if we have the correct tools to be able to manage, to be able to get rid of, to be able to help the body to facilitate and heal quicker, better, stronger, that to me is living free. And so, living free in our practice isn't living free from pain. It's living free from the worry of pain. It's living free from the stress of pain. And it's setting our goals and expectations around it as well, right? If somebody has a chronic condition, they have a chronic condition. And that is something that we need to manage. We need to set expectations, and we need to create functional goals around that condition, and then celebrate those wins, right? Everybody's dealt a different hand, and everybody struggles. And so oftentimes when people come in pain, they can feel like they're the only ones. And that can be very frustrating. But when you understand that everybody on earth has some sort of pain, it's just how are they dealing with it? Are they showing it up? Are they focusing on it? That's where you come in. That's where the mental stuff to pain is incredibly powerful, the neuroscience. And so I think if I had to boil it up, it's not live free from pain. It's live free from worry of pain. It's live free from the shackles of pain. It's learning to live how we can suffer healthy, how we can move forward with freedom.
I like how it's not just like ignorantly optimistic, just saying we can avoid everything and we can keep you free from pain forever and no injuries. Like, well, if we're living a good, fulfilling life, we're going to be out there, we're going to break an arm, we're going to have injuries, we're going to get all scraped up. It reminds me, just a few years ago, I was thinking about, like, how would I raise my future kids? And I just got a little overwhelmed with, like, I can't prevent them from developing these negative beliefs or these negative mental maps. And I can't keep them safe from all of those mindsets that are just going to be pushed on them from the world around them. It was like, but what I can do is I can make sure they know how to reframe those negative mindsets and replace them with something more helpful. I'm like, okay, if I can teach them to do that, they'll be set. In the same way you're helping your patients, you're like, we're not going to prevent you from ever having pain, but we're going to give you the tools and the resources and the knowledge and the mindset to be able to work through that and get back to what we love. And like, yeah, that we can't just a pain-free life isn't possible, but I think we can have a stress and worry-free life if we know that we can avoid all that pain or we can work through all that pain.
Yeah. So, and you had said something in the Live Free program that I think was perfect. It's shoot for perfection. I'm paraphrasing, so please correct me. But my perception of what you were saying was shoot for perfection, but that's never, ever achievable. Like essentially the goal is that, but we know that that's never going to be achievable because by definition, living in this life is pain. For example, just before this call, I went and was working out and I was doing the stair stepper and on there, I'm thinking, man, this sucks. This is painful, but it's a voluntary pain. It's a choice to choose that pain because the alternative is a pain of ill health, of disease, of achy joints, of obesity. And so everybody's experiencing pain. It's just how you choose it.
Yeah. And what type of pain, like, am I going to be painful doing the things I love, like hiking a mountain, or am I going to be in pain because I was sitting on the couch all day? Like we get to choose the pain. And it's not just that we're stuck and we have pain no matter what. It's more of we just get to choose the experience. And then there's the things that go along with it.
And to that same point, I think when at least for me, when I've adopted that mindset, that's freeing. It's just saying that, hey, this is part of the human condition. We can lessen it. We can choose the pain. We can choose the lesser of the pain. We can choose working out versus not being able to function, not being there with the family, not being able to hop on an airplane. And man, in my practice, I can't count the number of times that patients will tell me sucks to get old. Man, it really is. And that's that mindset. And I don't know about you, maybe it's because I'm not there yet. I don't want to, I guess, have the wrong mindset about this, but I'm eager. I'm excited to age because, I'm looking forward to doing those things as I age, being functional as long as I can be. And in my practice, I have 85-year-olds that are still doing pull-ups and running and active and getting on the ground with their grandkids. And I have 65-year-olds that are, man, they're like, I can't move. I can't walk 100 yards. And so, there's a little bit of genetics there, but a large part of it is the choices and how we choose to suffer. And there's always consequences to our choices.
So from your perspective, what does it mean to live free through the lens of physical health? Like what does that look like, living free?
So living free to me from a, I guess, example perspective, like the doing or what's it look like in real life, I would say it's number one, fueling your body with food that agrees with your body. That's number one. Number two is healthy movement. I'm a big believer that we need to be moving every day. Ideally, we should do some form of movement or exercise every day. And healthy thoughts as well. So we need to make sure that, and this is your world, but we're focusing on the right things. We're communicating to ourselves in positive language. We know how to have the tools where if we do get into a confined state, that we can utilize tools to bring us out of confined state. In chiropractic, there's something called the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, toxins. And I think that's a great framework for saying and looking at how you can live free is, number one, the thoughts. Are they positive? Do we have the healthy mindset? Do we have the tools in place where if we get confined, we can get out of it? You look at traumas, and we think of traumas as I broke my arm or my leg or as in a car crash, and while that certainly can be, a lot of time traumas are little micro traumas. Not exercising, eating the wrong foods, that's a trauma to our body. That's a stress, a negative stress to our body. And then toxins as well. So making sure that we're exposed to the healthy foods, that we're not putting drugs and alcohol and cigarettes into our body. And if we do that, then we're living free because we're in agreement with what our body needs, what our body desires and wants the most. We're getting out of our own way and just letting the body and the mind guide us as to what we need to do.
My perspective has always been like living free is all about capabilities and what you can do. But I think you added a little missing piece in there. It's living in alignment with what our body needs. In the Live Free program, we talk about the 3 powers, focus, meaning, and action. It's all about, okay, well, here's what your brain is capable of doing. So let's make sure our efforts match what our brain is capable of doing. But then you took it a step further and it was like, let's make sure the dietary intake is matching what our body needs because that's what it's designed to be able to process. Like, yeah, we can break down toxins and then expel them, but our body has these specific metabolic pathways to process specific nutrients, and it needs these specific nutrients. And so if we're able to give our body what it needs, then of course, capability and function is just a natural result. It's allow our body, give it what it needs so it can do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. And I like that, what you said there, Bryson, about living to its maximum potential. That's so huge and really encompasses everything about living free. It's about maximizing your potential. It kind of feeds into that. Like the maximum potential for somebody might never be, pain-free or they might, we all have to live within our own potential of what we're given and what we can do. And then living free, obviously, as you stated, it's maximizing that potential that we have in also all aspects of our life.
And this kind of brings up an interesting kind of thought experiment. Obviously, like someone can come in with some physical limitations, whether it's an injury or something chronic. And then obviously that's going to shape and impact their perspective and their belief about where their potential is. Like if they come in and they have chronic back pain, they're probably not thinking they can go run a marathon. anytime soon. But then at the same time, we know that our perspectives and what we believe is possible is going to impact and change like our physical state, and then consequently what we practice over time. How have you seen that show up in your practice? Do you feel like people end up with an injury and then come in and then that changes their beliefs about what is possible and what they're capable of? Or do you feel like the beliefs about what they're capable of and what they can achieve with their body shapes their physical state and the physical function of their body? Or does it go both ways? I don't know.
Man, that's a tough question. It's almost like which came first, the chicken and the egg. The mind and the body are so intricately related, in my opinion. It's almost impossible to influence one without the other, and that's been my experience in practice. And obviously, we focus heavily on the body piece of it. But I will tell patients often, hey, visualize yourself doing this activity, not in pain. Visualize. I want you to close your eyes and do some deep breathing and just picture yourself in the garden and being happy and doing what you like to do in the garden with no back pain. And that's powerful. And I think a lot of people will, it seems kind of woo woo, just give me the treatment, just give me the adjustment that'll fix everything. And they don't quite realize that is the treatment, that is part of the process. And especially with pain, and this is a whole other conversation, but when people have been in chronic pain for a while, those pathways are wired.
Yeah.
And there's a whole field of medicine that is dedicated to unwiring those pain pathways. And what they're finding is that where this field, this is an emerging field because it never used to be thought of like that. It kind of used to be brushed under the rug. And now we're realizing like, whoa, yeah, the brain actually is very important in pain. And if we have wired those pain pathways and those neurons to just keep firing, even if that tissue is healed beyond the brain in the body, those pain pathways could still be firing. And the example of that is like phantom limbs, with amputees. Yeah. We have pain in the limb that isn't there, and it's because those pathways in the brain they're wired in. So I'm sure you probably have a lot of knowledge in that or have studied that in your studies, I'm guessing at some point, but it's one field that is really kind of emerging in pain management.
Independent of what you're doing as a physician, when it comes down to it, it's the person's body and like the cells in that specific area or the neural pathways associated with that pain. The change is going to happen inside their body on a cellular level. Even if you're doing, red laser or you're doing, any sort of manipulation or heat, cold, whatever it is, all you're really doing is helping the body shift towards a better state, trying to provide some physical manipulation or giving the cells what they need. But in the end, it's going to be their body that makes the actual healing happen. And if they're convinced in their mind that they're going to be stuck with this, then why would their body respond differently? Why would their body get rid of the pain that they believe is just going to be there? This is just a fact of life, is that I'm going to be stuck with this pain.
Yep, 100%. And what we do as clinicians, patients will come in, heal me, doc, fix me. And I have to correct them and say, I'm not fixing you. Your body is the one fixing you. I'm just facilitating. I'm trying to speed that process up, make that process a little bit better, more efficient. But ultimately, it's your body that does the healing from above down, inside out. And sometimes the best medicine is just getting out of your own way. Like you said, setting those expectations, seeing yourself as actually healing, visualizing it, understanding that, and setting the template in your own mind that, yeah, this will be the future, going through this is the vision and this is the path and here's what I need to do, and seeing that, and then of course experiencing it playing out. They did that study, and you might have even mentioned it in the program. I'm not sure if you did or not, but how powerful visualization is, where they took 3 groups, had them shoot free throws, and it was essentially one group, they didn't practice at all or didn't visualize at all and shot 25 free throws, and the make rate was abysmal. I think it was like 7 out of 25 or something. And then the one group that actually practiced free throws and then went and shot, they hit, I believe, 23 out of 25. And then the other group that just visualized, no practice, but just visualized shooting free throws, I believe hit 21 out of 25. So essentially what that study was showing was something to the effect of visualization is very powerful, almost as powerful as actually doing the action.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when studies like that get brought up, people think of it as like, oh, well, you're practicing it in your mind. You're like running through the patterns and you're kind of activating those motor cortex pathways without actually causing the muscles to fire. And I think that's part of it. But I think what we're missing in that conversation is the belief that it builds that it's possible. There's this quote from one of my favorite rock climbers of all time, Tommy Caldwell. I'm pretty sure we ended up quoting him in the Live Free program towards the end of it, about like it was right after he had finished summiting the Dawn Wall of El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. This literally was the impossible wall. Like it had been carved smooth by glaciers, literally no holds. Like there was a few sections where he was literally finding little crystals of rock the size of like a peppercorn to be able to put his foot on, to be able to make it up to the next move. Just by all standards impossible. And at the end, I'm paraphrasing here, pretty close, but still paraphrasing. He said, after all these years of practicing and training and rehearsing, I realized it was less about building the physical capabilities and more, or just as much or more about building the belief. And I think that's why training is so important, is because we're not just getting better physically and developing the capabilities, like we're seeing ourselves accomplish parts of that impossible task, even if we're breaking it up into little sections. And part of that is like we then have to focus on that win and try to ignore all the times we failed, like still learn from it. But if all we're doing is focusing on how often we failed, and then we're just building the belief that I can't do part A, B, C, or D, when in reality we're like, but I can do F, G, H, I, and all these other parts. And I think, well, I wish more physicians understood that and incorporated it more into their practice. I think it's easy to come in and treat the physical, apply the therapy, run the tests, run the diagnostics, tell them what's wrong, tell them what you're going to fix. It's a little bit harder, and it takes a little bit more time to train the patient's mind to find and recognize the progress and the wins, not just to prove to them that treatment is working, but to help them become familiar with the idea of a full healthy body, not encumbered by pain at all. And that's a harder process, but I think it's super essential.
100% it is. Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there, Bryson.
Kind of a little bit of a segue in your specific experience in your practice. How have you seen someone's physical limitations or pain or loss of function affect their confidence and their approach to life?
And it's really sad. It's heartbreaking sometimes. I'll see patients, and we always set goals with our patients. What do you want to achieve? What brought you in? How will we know that our plan or our treatment approach is successful? And we try and get beyond just the pain numbers. Oh, I want to get out of pain. Everybody wants to get out of pain. That's not a goal. I want to be able to walk with my wife again. Those are the goals. And seeing patients that are at stages like that, it's one of those things that really, I'm in a position where I get the benefit to see those. So that motivates me so much to maintain my health and to do it. And I wish the public could stand at my door or sit in my consult room and see all these people come in. And I have a feeling it would be life-changing for a lot of people, because then they would start, or at least they would have the motivation to say, okay, I don't want to be able to not, go on a walk with my wife, or not be able to garden again, or play with my grandkids, or those things. And those are very real things, and I hear them all the time. So,
what kind of a follow-up question, how have you seen patients' injuries or their pain or their loss of function affect their identity, like how they view themselves and what they think about themselves?
Yeah. It's interesting, because in setting those goals with patients, that's a real struggle for a lot of patients. They will, I used to love playing softball, but I'll give that up if I can do this. It's almost like they're bartering in their mind with themselves. So I think it's a hard shift. It really is for patients as they lose function, or that pain inhibits them from doing something that they really love, especially if it's something that, their identity was part of that, and they don't know how to shift that identity, or to even reframe that identity to, well, maybe I'm not the best tennis player in, my town, but I still enjoy it. And, if their identity is wrapped up in that being the best, you can't be the best forever. You can't be the best forever, you know? So yeah, I would say that that's a challenge for a lot of patients, and probably, I think in large part just because the tools for them aren't there to be able to reshape the identity, reframe it in a different light. You know, you give a lot of good examples in your program of reframing, your personal examples of how you reframe certain things. The mountain biking experience I thought was phenomenal. So yeah, it does affect patients a lot.
So in the Live Free program, we talk about learning to see pain and these negative emotions as external symptoms of something else going on inside of us. Could you share your philosophy and your perspective on pain and symptoms?
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's pretty simple. Pain and symptoms are signals. And I will tell the patients they are the fire alarm that's going off. And if we just take medications to cover them up, that fire, we won't hear the alarm anymore, and we'll be up, we'll be in the living room, but in the kitchen there is a fire burning. And it would be insane to just go and turn the fire alarm off and go continue watching TV. We need to get up and we need to put out the fire, and then we need to address the damage that's been done as well. And so pain is a signal, it's a motivator, and we shouldn't ignore it. We need to pay attention to it so that we can understand better what needs to be done, and we can then put out the fire. And then, the fire in my world, the fire is, a lot of people come in because of the fire. A lot of people come in because the pain told them to come in. Once the pain is gone, once that alarm is off and we put out the fire, we still might need to do some carpentry, right? And that's the maintenance. That's the keeping things healthy. That's the little treatments that you'll get every other week, once a month, once a week, some people, just to keep things good, to keep things at their maximum potential. I think in your world, that might be the meditation, the daily meditation, that might be your primers, right? The hard work, the fire might be, I'm in a lot of pain and I need a weekend seminar. I need a coach for, to meet with weekly for a while, but after that, then you need to maintain it. Otherwise you're going to forget it and things will start to revert back to how they were.
Yeah, no, I love that example. I think I've given the example a lot of, just not taking a Tylenol to get rid of your headache, because the headache is a sign that there's something wrong. There's tension, you're dehydrated, inflammation, something. But yeah, no, I like that example because people get it. Like, yeah, if there's a fire, it'd be idiotic to just ignore the fire and the smoke. And yeah, after we put the fire out, we still have to fix the damage that's been done. And we probably need to get in the habit of not leaving the stove on, or not leaving something in the oven longer than needed so that we don't get another fire in the kitchen. What do you feel is the number one characteristic or attribute that determines if a patient will make a good full recovery? Like they come in, you're sitting with them, and they either have this characteristic or they don't, and you immediately know and can predict what their treatment outcome, what their prognosis is going to be.
Yeah. Aside from the typical patient profile, and what I mean by the typical patient profile is this patient coming in, two patients could have the same symptoms. One patient smokes and drinks and has bad healthy lifestyle habits and that. The other doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, exercises regularly. That's huge, right? But that's a given. We all know that. I would say the other one's honestly mindset and hope. If they think that what I'm going to do is going to get them better and they believe in it, the outcomes just tend to be better.
Yeah, I know there's so many studies looking specifically at hope with cancer patients. And I believe there's also quite a few about hope in chronic pain patients as well. But you don't hear it a lot with, more typical standard injuries like a knee injury or tennis elbow or things like that. Do you feel like it's just because if they're hopeful, they're going to be more likely to do their exercises at home? Or do you feel like there's something even beyond that? And maybe it's like, you have people that aren't hopeful and they're still doing their exercises at home. And then you have people that are hopeful and obviously they're doing their exercises because they believe it'll work.
Yeah. It's probably a little bit of both. Hope would, I think, would make them more adherent to the recommendations and the guidelines, but there is absolutely something to. I can't say I haven't seen this study, but my assumption and my belief would be that if you hold those other variables constant, that hope would be a driving factor in their recovery. And I think we know that the placebo effect, right? That's kind of what we're speaking to. So I believe that that is a powerful tool and one that's essential for the maximum healing that you can achieve.
Do you feel like hope is something that you as the physician can help increase in that patient? Is there or are there set things that you do on a regular basis to increase that level of hope for them?
Yeah, yes. And one of the biggest things is just the confidence that comes with the clinician. And I have a business partner, and we talk about the confidence when we give our recommendations, being as confident and truthful though as well. And that's the fine line that I find challenging to walk, because we want to give confidence, we want to give that hope, because that's where patients really do see the best results. At the same time, we want to be realistic with it, right? And if we truthfully don't think that they will ever get pain-free and their goal was pain-free, we need to be realistic with that as well. And then just reframe that hope, that, hey, you don't need to be pain-free to have the ability to do all the things that you told me that you want to do. And so then they get that hope, and they actually even get more excited because it's less of a journey for them, right? Going from an 8 on the pain scale to a 0 seems daunting, but if I can tell them, hey, going from an 8 to a 3 or a 4 is still going to allow you to function and not focus on that pain and have the ability to do that. Now it's actually easier for them. And so to your point, it's a reframing. I had one example of a patient that had tried a lot to lose weight and just was struggling, and they weren't giving up some bad habits, though, alcohol. It's very challenging to lose weight if we're drinking alcohol. And I reframed it for her. And as soon as I reframed it, I said, look, you don't have to give this up forever. Let's just do it for 75 days. That was easy. And she left saying, I can do anything for 75 days. And I'm like, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And that's the hope, and that 75 days, I have no doubt that once she hits her goals, will hopefully, likely turn into an even greater time frame, and she'll be able to go on and do that. So yeah, to answer your question, I think hope in and of itself is powerful.
Yeah, I think that hope is a trainable skill, and it's a result of choices that we make. It feels like it's just kind of inherent in us, but all these inherent qualities and characteristics are really the result of a lot of small choices that we've made along the way. And if we were hopeful in our youth and then we became pessimistic as we became an adult, well, then we can become hopeful again. If we can train it in one direction, we can train it in the other direction. If we can develop bad posture, we can develop good posture. If we can develop chronic pain, we can develop lack of chronic pain. I also love what you said about that balance of optimism, but with realism in there. And I think that people actually respond better to an optimistic realism than just pure optimism. Because I think deep down we know that certain things are going to be impossible, or maybe it's still just a belief that we'll never be able to get down to a 0 on the pain scale, even if it is possible. And so whenever we hear, oh yeah, I'll help you get down to a 2 or a 3, that feels possible because our subconscious doesn't immediately disregard it because it's not the impossible 0 on the pain scale. And yeah, if we can go from an 8 to a 4, then maybe eventually we can go from a 4 to a 1, and then eventually we can go from a 1 to a 0. And taking those incremental steps, I think, is huge. Like if you're talking with somebody who is suicidal and they're about to take their own life, and you tell them, hey, we can get you to where you're living a joyous, happy life. They're like, no, that is incomprehensible. That is so impossible. You have no idea. But if we can help them understand, hey, we can get to the point where you're all right just moving forward with your life. It's still going to be hard. It's still going to be very disparaging, but you'll be all right with living another day. That is just a little bit more obtainable, and then if they can achieve that, then they can go one more step. And I think that's why every sort of healing journey is a process. If we try to just jump to the end, we haven't built up that belief that that's possible. But as we start making those little steps, we develop the belief that progress is possible. And if progress is possible, then continual progress is possible. And then eventually we've just progressed so far that we're at where we want to be. So I think that is a super essential approach. I'm not surprised to hear that that's your approach to helping people develop that hope. Makes sense. So what's the hardest part of your job as a physician? Like we just talked about helping people develop hope, and that seems like it could be pretty hard. Would you say that that's the hardest part of your job, or is there something else that is just more taxing, more difficult, more challenging.
Yeah, no, that actually I think is an easier and fun part, because you can kind of see, and you know when you got it, you see the patient's eyes light up like, "Oh, yeah, it's very clear." And I would say the most taxing part is having cases that just stump you, that you think you were going to help and they just didn't respond the way that you want them to. And I don't take lightly that patients put their faith and trust in me, and spend their time and their money, and that's the challenging piece of it. I want to help every single person. I want to get every single person out of pain and help them to meet their goals. That's the ideal, right? That's the ultimate goal. But there's just those challenging cases that for whatever reason, you're just not able to help, and even though you thought you were. So I would say that that's probably the most challenging piece of it. And two, not even from a perspective of like, what do you do now with it? But it's just more of the emotional toll to it, it weighs on you as a clinician, and I think any clinician that really cares and that wants to see their patients do well feels that to some degree or the other.
Do you feel like it's like those really hard, frustrating cases are more the ones where it's just a really tricky, weird diagnosis and you can't quite put your finger on it? Or it's this looks really straightforward and clear cut. I've seen these exact same symptoms before and resolved them quickly, and then it doesn't respond to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's a little bit of both. You'll have cases where you're like, man, there's not much hope, but we'll proceed, and you tell the patient, and then they just get way better. And you'll have cases where, like what you said, I think this should be clear cut, and you go in with this kind of air of confidence that maybe is a bit overinflated, and it really humbles you. So yeah, it's a bit of both.
Do you have, or I guess, how do I phrase this question? When you come across those cases that just really stump you and don't turn out like you did, and they just kind of mess with your confidence, and they're just really frustrating because you wanted to help the patient, what do you do to make sure that doesn't affect you going forward? Like you personally as a physician?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. The frame that I remind myself is that it's unrealistic to help everybody. I have a set of tools, and I don't have all the tools. And sometimes it's just beyond what I can do. And just remembering that there isn't one physician or clinician out there that can help every single person. So, and then going back to what we initially talked about at the very beginning of this conversation is remembering the wins, and then refocusing on the wins, refocusing on the patients that I have helped, and looking at those and remembering. It's interesting though, because it seems like, you have to remind yourself of 2 or 3 of those to kind of make up for the one. And that's just human nature, right? We focus on the negatives a bit more than the positives.
Yeah.
You can probably speak to that, but so yeah, those are the tools that I utilize in practice to do it. And then just being able to have a serious conversation and be humble, have humility with the patient, and just be open and honest and say, I really thought that this was going to work, and I was hopeful, and, I'm sorry it didn't. And here's where we need to take you and guide you, or here's what else we can try, or, I've exhausted all my tools and resources that I have, and, we need to figure something else out. So
kind of changing gears a little bit and bringing more into the discussion, your experience with the Live Free program. What stood out to you the most as you went through the Live Free program, and how did that apply to your career, to your family life, to your role as a physician and a healer?
Yeah. So my experience is a bit unique with it. I had some training, we'll say previous years. I've done, Tony Robbins before. I've had coaching. So was very familiar with a lot of the concepts that you had in there. And so for me, a lot of it, there was certainly some new concepts, but a lot of it was, I would say, salt on the road to gain better traction. And it was cool looking at it through that lens, because I had the privilege of going through it and knowing a lot of the terms and where you're going with it, and looking at it from that angle, which was unique. I would say that the biggest thing for me that I took away that I really started implementing, well, two things. Number one, the reframing. And I was able to work through some maps, which maps were a new concept for me in the terminology that you used. I was able to reframe some maps. One of them that I'm pretty happy about, actually, because I didn't really realize how much it was affecting me. You know, a lot of maps you don't. They just kind of run under the radar and you live through them, and that's just the way it is, and you don't really think about it. So I was able to analyze that and work with that and do some map blowing up and re-implementing, which is fun.
Sweet.
But the reframing aspect of it was really, really cool too. And that's something that as you get better at, as you utilize more, shouldn't say you, as I utilize more, I'm able to do it better and better. So that was really neat. And then the second thing was just for a while there, a period in my life, I had meditated every single day for 20 minutes for 9 months straight, didn't miss a day. And I had gotten away from that. And frankly, I gotten away from meditation and sitting down with my thoughts and journaling. So the program really got me back into that, which powerful. Really powerful stuff.
Sweet. Do you feel like it's changed your clinical approach at all? Like whether it's just your capabilities and how you operate or how you interact and help patients develop that hope in the healing process? What's been your experience there?
I think the reframing, again, going back to the reframing piece of it has been helpful. And then also the meditation piece, which allows me to sit a little bit better. It extends that time from stimulus to response. So I'm able to give better answers to patients, be more present with them, and then to ask the questions when I'm with patients as to getting them on the correct plan, on the correct path, really listening to them. So yeah, I do think it has helped improved not only my life in general, but also my life clinically.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I think that we underestimate the importance of kind of prolonging that period between the stimulus and the response. And sometimes it's taking the exact same amount of time, but it feels longer to us. It doesn't feel quite as automatic. And I wish we could, have just a huge amount of time between the stimulus and the need for us to act. But a lot of times these things are happening just really fast. We can't just sit down with a patient and hear what they say and then think for 5 minutes before we respond. Like they need an answer now. And so being able to be totally present and totally aware and think clearly, I think is huge. So for someone who's listening who feels stuck, whether that's in their body or in their mind, where do you feel is the best place to start? Like something they can do today at home to at least start that process of getting unstuck and starting to feel better.
Yeah, I think the easiest. I mean, I'll go from two different places. If you just need to ease into something and it's free, you just want to start somewhere, get a journal, and then go for a walk. You're hitting the physical, going for a walk, and journaling just to get your thoughts out. And you don't even need to follow anything. Just start writing down. I think that those two things are going to be very important. If you're a go-getter and you're like, you know what, okay, that sounds great, but I actually want to dive all in. I think commitments show up in two places. It's either in our checkbook or on our calendar. And so, I would say get a coach in both areas, right? Get a coach for the mental side, whether it's a Live Free program or somebody else locally. Get a coach that can guide you because they're going to be able to show you the blind spots, right? And then get a trainer. Get a gym membership. And I get it. You don't want to go to the gym and I don't know what I'm doing. And well, that's fine. Get a trainer, like hire a trainer. And I get it. It costs money. And that's the point. It's going to commit you to going, and granted, some people in socioeconomic classes that might be tough, but I would say see what you might be able to cut out. If you're in that position, see what you might be able to cut out, Netflix or subscription someplace, you might be able to scrounge some things up, sell some things to be able to buy programs that are frankly gonna be very beneficial. And nobody ever got done going for a walk or a workout and said, man, I wish I really hadn't have done that. That's never happened. Nobody
I wish I'd watched Netflix instead,
Right. Yeah. So, those are things that it's just a matter of doing them. And one thing that I've noticed in my life is Newton's first law: an object in motion will stay in motion and an object at rest will stay at rest. And I'm sure you've experienced this. When you're moving, you want to keep moving. It's like, I don't want to stop. When you're sitting there at rest, watching TV, that momentum of just sitting there, it's going to pull you into keep doing that. And it's that state shift. It's the three powers in your program that you talked about. It's shifting that state and moving. And if you can get moving going for a walk. That's huge. So start with the walk, start with journaling, see where it goes.
Well, and I think, maybe you were aware of this, but I think those two examples of going for a walk or journaling, it's like we're moving our mind or we're moving our body. And that's why social media scrolling, doom scrolling, binge watching TV shows, our body stops moving and our mind stops moving. That's why I think that there are a lot of mentally stimulating and engaging shows out there, like watching a documentary that makes you think. Cool. If our body is super tired and we're just exhausted because we've been physically moving all day, give our brain a chance to keep moving. But if we stop both of those, that's where it gets really hard to kickstart that up again. I love that. Yeah, and like you said, both of those are free. They don't take that much time. 10, 15 minutes. You can journal quite a bit. You'd be surprised at how much you can journal in 15 minutes and what clarity can come in that short period of time. Same thing with a walk, especially a walk without your phone, whether you just keep it in your pocket or you leave it at home. Just being alone with your thoughts and physically moving, it also, I think, kickstarts your brain and your brain starts moving as well. I think that's huge.
100%. And, as people listen to this and they think about going for a walk, your brain, if you're not used to it, your brain is going to come up with every excuse under the sun. Well, I got to go get my shoes, and then I got to get my workout clothes on, and then but people that do it, they just go for a walk, I'm just going for a walk. Like all of those things, they're not each thing that they have to think about. It's just one thing, right? And what they're really focused on is the walk and how good it's going to feel. And so again, to the 3 powers, changing the focus, what you're focusing on with it. Oh, I got to get my journal. I have to open it. And I got to sit down over here and I have to find a pen that works. And I got to do this. It's like, no, just find a piece of paper and start writing. I guess, there's no negative to this. Just start doing it and just see what happens to it. And it'll be, for those that have never done it before, it's the 2 best things. I really like what you said about moving the brain. I never thought about it like that, but moving the brain, I really like that. Really like that a lot. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah. No, I think that's one to keep in the back pocket and use. What's been the biggest thing that you've learned as a chiropractor or just as a human being since you've started your chiropractic journey?
I would say that there's a few good ones. I think understanding that you have a choice is very empowering and powerful. I believe that the way that society has shifted in general is it's unfortunately taught us to take the role of victim quite often. And I think that is done to try to sell us stuff, because if it's not your fault, then, just do this and da 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 da. But realizing your agency and what you have is important. And so I would say that that's one of them. And then I think the other thing that we kind of hit on a little bit, I read a book, and you might have read it as well, but it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Very small book. Highly encourage anybody to read it. It's a little summary. Viktor Frankl was a survivor in the Holocaust, but he also had a unique perspective because he was a psychologist by trade. And so he got to experience, or was forced to experience, what life was like in a concentration camp and what it did to a person's mind and their psyche. And he kind of determined what he thought was the main factor between somebody making it through and not. And he had kind of summarized that the people that got through it were the ones that could take such a horrific experience and look out the window and still be like, man, that's a beautiful sunset. And so I think it goes back to when we go through this world, it's about making our sufferings worthwhile. It's about looking at pain as a gift and saying, oh man, this sucks right now, but what can I learn from this? How can I take this lesson and grow from this, change, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally? And if you take that mindset, pain is a wonderful teacher. It's what takes people into my office. It's what will initiate change. We just have to be willing to listen to it and then act upon it. So I think those 2 things are the life lessons that I've taken away since becoming a chiropractor.
Yeah, and I think they're more connected than most people realize. Like everything is a choice, and finding the good in everything. And that's what's going to give these experiences meaning and purpose. Because purposeless suffering and pain that's just draining. I don't think any of us could last really long if this pain and the suffering didn't have a purpose. But when it does have a purpose, that's what creates Olympic athletes. That's what creates champions. That's what creates people that can live and function well into their 80s and their 90s, because they took painful experiences, even if it was just lifting at the gym or running or on a treadmill, they took that pain and they gave it meaning. So I love that. Okay, last question. What's one piece of advice that you wish everybody understood and implemented and applied? And this can be just as Seth, as a person who is a fellow human on this planet, or as Dr. Barr, chiropractic physician.
I think one easy thing that has really helped to shape my thinking is, a coach of mine said this, and she said, ask how and what, because why will make you cry. And when you look at things and you analyze, or even you talk to other people, ask how and what questions, because when you ask other people, or more importantly yourself, why questions, why is this happening? Why did this occur? It's going to make you cry, and you're going to perpetuate that suffering. But if you can ask how and what, how did this occur? What can we change? What can we do differently? How can we look at this another way? It opens up a world of possibilities. So I think that's an easy one. It's shaped my life. That's always stuck with me since I've learned it. And I hope that other people can take that with them.
That's awesome. I think that it all goes back to our focus and the choices that we get to make. We shape our experiences. We shape our health. We get to choose what our life looks like here. And I think it can be an incredibly scary thing, but I think at the same time, it's really, really awesome. So Seth, thank you for being here with us. And for those listening, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Yeah. Feel free to reach out. You can Google us on Google, Live Free Health. We're in Wisconsin, Delafield. You can check out our website, livefreewi.com. Yeah. Feel free to connect to us. We have Instagram, social media, that whole thing. So Live Free WI is our handle. So
cool. We'll include those links in the caption of the show.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Live Free podcast. Subscribe to never miss out on new episodes, and follow us on Instagram at livefree_neuro-wellness.